Welcome to the Israel Insider Weekly Podcast, where we talk about the news in Israel with Ron Cantor, president of Shalanu TV and Israel Regional Director for God TV. I'm Lisa Hutchison. Thanks for joining us today. Well, Ron, first up, let's start with a wonderful Olympic update.
Yeah.
We have a gold medalist now in Israel. Why
Yes,
don't
we
you share
do.
with us about his story?
Well, this would be the second gold medal in Israel's history. We're not really big in the Olympics. We try. We sent our largest team this year with 90 participants. And yeah, this is our third medal, which is a record for Israel. And now we get a gold medal from a fellow by the name of Artem the Gold Payat. And I'm going to challenge all of our listeners to say that 10 times.
Nice.
But we'll call him Artem for
There
now.
we go. Yeah.
But he won, and I'm sure many of our listeners saw it if they're watching the Olympics. He won the floor exercise against some of the top gymnasts in the world. The fellow from Russia. In this gentleman, Artem Dagolpat. Let's try it again. Dagolpayat.
There we go.
Dagolpayat. That's how we say it. He's from Ukraine. He immigrated to Israel as a young man with his parents. I think 12 years old, something like that. And he's from Ukraine, and I'm also from Ukraine. And by saying I'm also from Ukraine, I mean that I lived there for 1 year.
Nice.
A lot of folks don't know that, but me and Ilana and our kids, we lived there in 98, 99. We planted a congregation in a city called Berdichev, which is the city that Fiddler on the Roof is based upon.
Oh,
so there you have it. But anyways,
nice.
He is from Ukraine, and he immigrated when he was 12 years old, and he had a love for gymnastics, became great, and now he is our second gold medalist in the history of Israeli Olympic history.
Now, I understand one of the things I was reading about him was his mother jumped in there right after, as all good mothers do, and jumped in there right after he won his medal, and they were interviewing her, and she kind of put his personal business out there. So, but it was really, it tapped into something pretty deep there in Israel. So will you share with us about that as well?
Yeah, she did. And good for her, because light needs to be exposed to this issue.
Yeah.
She talked about the fact that Artem wants to marry his girlfriend. I think they've been together for 3 years, but they cannot legally get married in Israel. And that's because technically Artem is not Jewish. Now, he is Jewish. His father is Jewish. But according to religious law, or what we call halakha in Hebrew, you have to have a Jewish mother. And that's what makes somebody Jewish. So you could be just a tiny, tiny little bit Jewish in terms of your blood if your great grandmother on your mother's side, it's got to always be through the women, was Jewish. That would make you Jewish according to Jewish law. Now, I don't agree with that. I think you can make a case that it's through the father via scripture, or even through one parent, or who you decide to identify with. We know that Timothy did have a Jewish mother, and that he goes to the temple and gets circumcised. So I believe that anybody with a Jewish parent can identify. But again, as we're always saying on this podcast, there is no advantage to being Jewish in the kingdom of God. There is the calling of God on the Jewish people, Romans 11:29, it's irrevocable, and God is using Israel, but God doesn't love the Jewish people better. So, you don't need to do a DNA test to find out you can if you want, if it's interesting, but it doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you worse in God's eyes. Nevertheless, if you're in a country and you're part of that country, it's kind of weird that you can't get married in that country.
Yeah.
So if you go back to the beginning of the state of Israel, the institution of marriage was given over to the Rabbanut, which is the rabbinic authority. And not just them, it was given over also to the Muslim authorities and the Catholic authorities. In other words, there is no such thing as a civil marriage in Israel. You must get married through your Muslim cleric, or through your Catholic priest, or through your rabbi. The problem is the rabbis won't marry you if you're not Jewish halachically, or according to Jewish law. So what happens is that many, again, I guess Artem didn't want to do this. Dolga Payat, he didn't want to do this, so he's been holding out. But a lot of Israelis, what they'll do is they'll go to Cyprus for a couple days. They'll get married. They'll have a little vacation. And then they'll come back, and then they'll have another wedding for their friends and family in Israel. And it's really sad. It's not right.
Yeah.
Israelis don't like this. I don't know any Israelis who aren't Orthodox who like this. It's a horrible system. And now we're in a situation where our government, there are no more ultra-Orthodox parties in the government. We have a completely secular government. Now we have religious people in the government. In fact, our prime minister is a kippah-wearing religious Jew, but we don't have religious parties in the government, and they can no longer demand, certain things. They typically control a few seats, well, about 15 out of 120. But when they're in the government, they can blackmail whoever is prime minister to saying, we're not going to vote for your stuff if you don't give us our stuff. But now that we have a completely secular government, we're hoping that they will overturn this. I know that I'm looking for this quote here from Yair Lapid. Here it is. He said, "I will fight with all my might." Now, he's our foreign minister, but he's also kind of the leader of the government, even though he's not the prime minister yet. He's the one that put the coalition together. He has the most seats in the government, 17 in his Yesh Atid party. And his father fought for the rights of people like this. His father, interestingly enough, back in the early 2000s, had a party called the Shinui Party. Shinui means change. And the Change Party was saying we can no longer let the ultra-Orthodox cripple the government, cripple our society. And so his dad, if he were still alive, would be very proud of him now. He said, "I will fight with all my might for civil unions for couples. It's intolerable that someone can fight on behalf in the Olympics, behalf of the state of Israel in the Olympics, represent us and win a gold medal and not be able to get married in Israel." Well, I would take it a step further. It's unthinkable or intolerable that anyone, even if they don't go to the Olympics, if they don't win a gold medal. In other words, this isn't a prize for winning a gold medal. Any two Israelis should be able to marry each other in Israel.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's archaic, and I'm hopeful that it will be over soon.
Well, good for Artem's mom, and I'm glad this is coming into the spotlight there. And congratulations to Artem. And the judo team won a bronze medal. The baseball team, they didn't quite make it. They had a little possible shot there at the end out of the 6 teams.
There is nobody in Israel that plays baseball. Like, there's no such thing as a baseball field in the country. I mean, if there is, I've never seen it. It's a bunch of expats from America, playing baseball, but it's not played in schools. It's funny to me that we have a team. It's awesome. I applaud it. But these are, Jewish, I'm assuming Jewish, mostly American,
right.
Either former or minor leaguers.
Yeah.
That they put together team. They got crushed by the American team, I believe. And I can't believe it says they lost 7-6 to the Dominican Republic.
Right.
That's a shock to me because Dominican Republic, they are a powerhouse when it comes to baseball. Many of the major leaguers in the U.S. are from the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, and if I read it right, they actually were, in the lead right up to I think the last inning, and then the Dominican Republic just pulled it out at the last inning. So
well, we didn't want the world to say that the Jews are taking over baseball, so we let them win.
There you go.
And we did finish in 5th place of all 6 teams.
Yeah. There you go. So maybe,
of course, today, August 5th, and then tonight we know that we've got Lanoy Ashram. She is going to be going for gold. She's the #1 rhythmic gymnast in the world, and so she has a very high probability of winning gold medal tonight. So hopefully we'll have our 2nd gold medal. That'll be unprecedented, and our 3rd in the history of Israel. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, stay tuned, and hopefully we'll give everybody a little update next week on that. So, Ron, you have some special news for us. Why don't you share with everybody what's happening?
Absolutely, I do. I want everyone to write down this website, JerusalemStudio.org, and that is what it's about. It's about a Jerusalem studio for Shalano TV and an apartment. where we'll be able to stay when we're in Jerusalem. But more importantly, it is something happened a few weeks ago. My brother-in-law got a hold of me. We had a prophetic word about relocating. We've lived in Tel Aviv most of our time in Israel, and we had this prophetic word about relocating to Jerusalem. And I don't take every prophetic word as from God. Well, if it's genuinely prophetic, I do. But we weigh it, we pray. But Elon and I both had this really wonderful peace about this. And then a few days later, my brother-in-law comes to me. He works in the construction industry, and he said there is a facility that they've got a building. They've got one unit left, and he was offering it to us, and we prayed about it. And we felt good about it. And it's not built yet, it's being built, and we saw the view of the balcony. It's a beautiful view of Jerusalem. We would build that into a studio where the balcony view would be the view of our audience. So we're super excited about this. We're actually gonna have our own Shalano studio in Jerusalem. We've got one in the bottom of a congregational building, literally underground in Tel Aviv, but this will be open air, and our listeners will be able to, or not listeners, but our viewers, that's the whole point, will be able to see Jerusalem. Now, here's the catch. Our ministry, Messiah's Mandate, is purchasing this. It's going to be owned by the ministry, not by any individual. And we, in the next 45 days, we're believing God for $200,000. The good news is that we have already received commitments of $61,000. So we need, I think that is $139,000 more. I know God is going to provide. I am not worried about it. I am excited about it. But I want to invite our listeners to put your tent peg in Jerusalem. Join with us as we seek, and again, if you don't know what Shalano TV does, we broadcast the good news of Yeshua in Hebrew 24/7 on a TV channel via the internet, just like Netflix or any other on-demand channel. And our new website is going to be done very soon. It's going to be amazing, and it's going to actually have an English part as well. But some of our videos, testimonies, where we share how we met Yeshua in Hebrew. Mine is up there. And we're getting over 35,000 views on some of these. And these are all coming from inside of Israel. Israelis are hearing about Yeshua. So I want to invite people to join with us. We really do need your partnership. Just go to JerusalemStudio.org. That's JerusalemStudio.org. Thanks.
Last Friday, the Center for Countering Digital Hate, the CCDH, they released a report on their findings on the major social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And basically during the time of the recent war between Hamas and Israel in May till into late June, they were monitoring those platforms, and they were reporting they had 714 posts that they said were anti-Semitic in nature. And when they reported them to the platforms, what the response was by those platforms is astonishing to me. And so can you maybe share, what those findings were?
This is a really interesting thing. And I'm hoping for those who are listening that you will go to Facebook and go to Twitter and share this story. Go to roncantor.com and look for this story. The headline is "New Report Finds Facebook and Other Social Media Giants Fail to Stop Anti-Semitism." Share this on Facebook. Share it on Twitter, because they need to be held to account. Because it's the CCDH, which is the Center for Countering Digital Hate. They flagged 714 posts for review for their anti-Semitic nature. This is during the recent war with Hamas, and these posts had 73 million impressions.
Wow.
That means they just less than 1,000 posts got to almost 100 million people, and they were blatantly anti-Semitic. And so this US-UK nonprofit group, they said that there were blood libel accusation, Holocaust denials, racist cartoon drawings of Jews, neo-Nazi propaganda, and all kinds of anti-Semitic claims about Jewish puppeteers controlling the world. By the way, if we controlled the world, these would not be on Facebook. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
If we control, I mean, we've got one of our guys in Facebook. He runs Facebook, and he's not doing his responsibility in controlling the world. Some of the they, you know they are, right, Lisa? They.
Yes,
They
tell
are,
us who.
well, the Jews who control the world.
Right.
Need to get a hold of Mark Zuckerberg and rein him in line.
Come on.
But in all seriousness, if we controlled the world, then these things wouldn't be out there. We would, but we're actually fighting to get rid of them. And it says that Facebook removed just 1 in every 6 of these. So that means 5 of them continued.
Mm-hmm.
And this was released in what they a report that they called the failure to protect. So this is really shocking. Now, let me give you this quote from their founder. This is not about algorithms or automation. Our research shows that social media companies allow bigots to keep their accounts open and their hate to remain online, even when human moderators are notified. No one has a fundamental right to have an account on social media platform to bully Jews or to spread hatred we know that can end in serious offline harm. Now, here's the neat thing about this. The CEO, his name is Imran Ahmed.
Yeah.
Now, if it doesn't take a rocket science to say that is a Muslim name. I don't know if he is a practicing Muslim, but he's definitely, from an Arab country living, or at least his family, living in the UK, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a fellow from a Muslim background fighting for Jewish people. So at the very least, go find him on Twitter and just say, way to go. You're a good guy.
Yeah, that's right. Because it was amazing. Like in particular, Facebook, they said only acted on about 10% of the complaints they sent in. And YouTube, at the most, acted on about 21%. And I know even during that time, we had our own little interaction with this situation. Right along during those times, there was one of your videos that was up on Facebook on the Israel Insider platform and God TV. And all of a sudden, there was just this rain of obscene hatred on the platforms. All these things that this group was flagging, and we acted quickly, about them. But as far as I know, they weren't. I don't know that those people were actually removed. We just dealt with the posts. But I mean, and it wasn't just that they were attacking, you or what you had said. They were attacking other people who had commented positively on the post. And so, we were acting to protect those people as well. And so, just seeing that and realizing how very little at this point Facebook and the other social media platforms are doing. They all put out a statement saying, they were working on it and this sort of thing. But really, I was definitely struck with the fact that this isn't about automation. These were actual, there was a person that was not moderating the situation.
So human beings who saw these posts made a decision to leave them up there.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you, if it was the opposite, they would not have, because I've had, we've tried to boost different posts and they said, nope, you can't do that. And so we would call on Facebook and all social media. I mean, anti-Semitism is growing and growing and growing every day. And it's growing because of social media. Social media is not policing it. In fact, just, we have a small apartment that we rent out in the U.S. On Airbnb. And then when we're in the States, it's where we stay in Richmond. And we rented out, I had a guest in May, and I have a Israel coffee table book that I leave on one of our tables. And I came home and I've never opened it. It was a gift from somebody. And I open it up, and there is a note that says, free Palestine. And then some other, I think, stop the occupation. By the way, they spelled Palestine wrong. They said Palestine. They forgot the L, but that's not the point. The point is that we live in and I confronted the person. They never responded. I know who it was who did it, because I only put the coffee table book out in early May, right before I left back to go back to Israel. And so we live we're in a world where we feel like we have to let everyone know of our political stance. And so I was thinking just today, I'm doing some writing right now. I'm writing a paper for a class I'm taking. And one of the things I've been studying is the American Revolution. Now, during the American Revolution, they had theologians on both sides, those who were pro-revolutionary, separating from England, and those who were against it. By the way, John Wesley, one of the great heroes of the faith, was radically against the American Revolution. And he quoted Scripture. He quoted Romans 13, 1 Peter 2, where it said, honor the king. And then you had those on the other side who said, no, that doesn't apply to tyrants. And then they would say, well, no, wait a minute. Nero was a tyrant. And that's who was, So you had them going. Can you imagine, Lisa, if they had social media back then?
No.
Can you imagine the division, the hatred? I mean, thank God that if you wrote something back then, it would take, and this is a lesson for me, because I know that I am very opinionated, and I've got, I feel strongly about things, and sometimes I overstate it, and it can come across as mean or hurtful. But, back then, if you were going to write something, against the revolution, it might be months before anybody reads it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, they did in their own way have social media. It just was a much slower and
they had dial-up connections. They didn't
beyond that, it was like the carrier pigeon, take it, by land or sea. But yeah, that it definitely it's because I think because it is so instantaneous, and we've just lost our way with being able, to moderate ourselves as well, in the process. So yeah, I do think that this report is a very good sobering reminder, that what even though, we may think that it's maybe not as bad as it is, but just seeing these numbers, it really is that bad. And we need to pray and take action.
Need to let Facebook know. We need
we
need to do what the anti-Semites are doing. Use social media. Now, we have one more weapon as believers that they don't have, and that's prayer.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Pray, but then we also use our voice.
Have you heard of Shalanu TV? It's the only 24/7 Hebrew language gospel channel, and we are reaching tens of thousands of Israelis. Learn more at shalanunow.com. That's shalanunow.com.
Also in the news this week, Iran is looks like they have fired another shot toward Israel. There was an oil tanker in near Oman in the waters there, and it appears that all evidence shows that they've sent in 2 or more suicide drones. And it ended up taking the life of the captain, who was Romanian, and a security guard who was British. And the world is slowly responding, but Iran continues to ratchet up their talk as well. So will you fill us in on that story?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of folks are following this in the news. By the way, today they just swore in their brand new president, Ibrahim. Is it Raisi?
Raisi.
Ibrahim Raisi, who is a pretty serious hardliner, though he's saying that he wants to negotiate with the West. Just days after they sent 2 suicide drones to an Israeli ship, and what's interesting about this, and all the U.S., the U.K., they were slow to blame Iran. We weren't here in Israel. We were very quick to blame Iran. Yeah. We knew it was Iran. Yeah. It had all the hallmarks of Iran. And then the evidence came in that it was indeed Iran. And now you have the U.S. and the U.K. And in the U.S. and the government here, they're hoping it's not Iran. They're trying to get a deal together, and they're just so frustrated over this. They're like, "Come on, guys, we're trying to help you, but this is who they are, President Biden.
The scorpion.
This is who they are. They're
the scorpion story.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Your scorpion story.
Right, and that real briefly is there's a frog and a scorpion trying to get across a creek. And the scorpion says to the frog, "Hey, could you give me a ride on your back?" And the frog says, "No way, you're a scorpion. You're going to sting me." He said, "No, no, no. I know I'm a scorpion, but I really just, all I wanted to do is get across. I promise not to sting you." Long story short, he gives him a ride, puts him on his back. They get to the other side. And then sure enough, the scorpion stings him and frog's dying. And with his dying words, he says, "Why? Why would you do that?" He said, "I'm a scorpion." It's like, I didn't want to do it, but I am a scorpion. That's what I do.
Yeah.
In the same way, Iran, the Ayatollahs, the regime, they are a fundamentalist Islamic fanatical regime. They want Islam to dominate the world. They're not peace loving. They don't want, if any negotiating they do is temporary in their minds until they take over the world. And Israel understands that, and some other nations, even other Islamic nations, understand that. One of the reasons I believe that our relationship with Saudi Arabia is better than it has ever been. We have now peace deals with Morocco, with the UAE, with Bahrain, and warming relationships with many other countries. Sudan, we've got a peace treaty with. So they're recognizing that Iran, they're reckless, they're out of control. They're North Korea in the Middle East. And so finally, reluctantly, the other nations have realized this is Iran. And the only good part about this, and there's nothing good about somebody dying, but you've got a Romanian and somebody from Great Britain, one of the most powerful nations of the world, most powerful nations in the UN, that they killed a British national.
Yeah,
and if I'm in Great Britain, I'm like, wait a minute, you can't do that. So we'll have to see what happens with that. I don't want to take a whole lot of time on that, but I just hope that this would cause President Biden to just take a step back and just think, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And it was Benny Gantz, our defense minister in Israel, that says they're just 10 weeks away from getting weapons-grade uranium. So this is a country that we cannot allow to get the nuclear bomb. Ron, are you advocating war? No, I'm not. I don't want any more war. I don't want the U.S. at war. I don't want Israel at war. But I do want Iran stopped. They cannot get a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, that's right. And with that, I don't know. I just want to toss this out there and ask you your thoughts on this. So yesterday, Wednesday, in Israel, there were a few missiles that were launched out of Lebanon into Israel. And I know with this commercial ship near Oman, that was like Israel and Iran have been in what they call a shadow war for several years now, with different attacks at sea and on land. But like with this one, it was the first time where Iran, the back channels in Iran, did seem to admit that it was in retaliation for Israel taking out a couple of their guys who are in Syria the previous week. Now, is this Lebanon thing also connected to Iran, or is that just a separate skirmish?
Anything that comes out of Syria, Lebanon, Yemen is Iran, or Iran is Iran. They are, dependent on Iran for funds, for weapons, for all kinds of stuff. And so, Hezbollah does not, I don't believe that they do these things without permission from Iran. And so they sent a few missiles yesterday. And a lot of people are asking, is there going to be a war? Is this no, there's not going to be a war. And I'll tell you why there's not going to be a war. And it's a good thing for Hezbollah that so far their missiles, there was a few in May, and now we've got these two yesterday, that they did not cause any damage. They didn't hurt anybody. Because God forbid that one of these missiles actually hurt people, because then we'd have to respond. Now, if you go back to 2006, the last Lebanon war, which was, many people say that we lost that war. And when they're saying that we lost that war, they're not saying that we suffered more. They're saying that we underestimated Hezbollah, that we lost way too many soldiers. But if you ask the people of Lebanon, and I shouldn't laugh, I just in terms of the irony of it, if you ask the people of Lebanon, they're probably not thinking they won the war, because Beirut, half of Beirut was destroyed. We have so much firepower that we hold back so much in what we could do. We do what we have to do to stop aggression. But, Hezbollah is they're a radical terrorist group, but they actually have a place in the government of Lebanon, and the rest of Lebanon is pretty much scared of them. But right now, there's been a lot of Lebanese turning against Hezbollah, particularly if you remember a year ago that there was the explosion in the port of Beirut that looked like a nuclear bomb. It was one of the most awesome explosions I've ever seen.
Right.
The mushroom cloud, it was just horrifying.
Yeah.
And, many people died and buildings collapsed, and they haven't dug themselves out of that yet. And so Hezbollah has taken a lot of the blame for that. And, I haven't heard any other pundit say this, but I'm guessing that a lot of this has to do this bombing yesterday is, when everyone is against you, go and bomb Israel. I mean, it worked for Hamas. Hamas back in May, they it's not that they were unpopular in the West Bank in Gaza, but after the war, they were super popular. Now, technically, they lost badly. We didn't suffer any direct, or maybe one or two direct deaths, and they suffered quite a bit, and they lost a lot of terrorists during that. But just the act of aggression to Israel gets rewarded in the Arab world. Wow. So Hezbollah is trying to. They probably taking the page out of Hamas's book, and are saying, when the whole nation is against you, bomb Israel, because then you'll look like heroes. But no, I don't think they want a war. I mean, Lebanon is just broken. It's it's a failed state.
Yeah.
And it would be like Syria, fighting a war with Israel right now. Syria's, they're not even near. Technically, I don't think their civil war is over, and they certainly haven't rebuilt after it. So that's just a little bit on the tensions in our northern front.
Well, thanks for that update and commentary.
If you're enjoying the Israel Insider podcast, make sure to sign up for the Israel Insider Daily Mail with news from the Holy Land at join.theisraelinsider.com. That's join.theisraelinsider.com.
I don't think we could leave the podcast without a little bit of politics and government talk there in Israel. This week, there was an amazing breakthrough. Yeah. The government, or at least the cabinet, managed to put together a budget. And while that may sound like a snoozer, will you tell us why that is so significant?
Yeah, you might be tempted to turn off your podcast right now, but please don't. This is a really big deal, because if the present government doesn't pass a budget within the first 100 days of coming into office, they automatically forfeit. It goes to new elections. So the biggest hurdle that they had in coming into this new government was to pass a budget. By the way, that is why the last government failed, where Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz could not agree on a budget. Gantz wanted a 2-year budget, which would guarantee him becoming prime minister. Netanyahu wanted a 1-year budget because then he could, torpedo the government before Gantz came in as prime minister. So this is not only a big deal because of politics, it's also a big deal because we have to fund things. Can you imagine a business, legally as a ministry, Messiah's mandate? We're not allowed to go into the year without a budget. We have to submit a budget. And I don't like doing that because I'm not a numbers office person, but we have to do it. It's a requirement. And so our country, Israel, has been operating without a budget for the past 3 years, since 2018. And that means people don't get, things like welfare, people who are in real need, immigrants, people aren't getting the funds that they need. And so this is a really big deal. Now, having said that, now that it's gone through the cabinet, it has to go to the actual Knesset floor, and it has to be passed. It probably will be. because, the cabinet is this present government. The leaders of the parties who need to vote yes are the leaders of the government.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you might expect, Benjamin Netanyahu thinks this is a horrible budget. He said, I have passed many budgets in my time, but I've never passed such an atrocious budget before.
Wow.
It is full
Wow.
of economic cuts, tax and price increases. Instead of lowering taxes and making it easier for Israeli citizens, they are raising taxes and prices and harming Israeli citizens. Now, the problem with that is that most people, when they hear Netanyahu criticize the present government, they just hear white noise. He may be correct. He may be 100% correct. But most of the country, they just hear shh.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, because they know that Bibi is set on toppling this government. And so he's never going to say anything good. We could win the Nobel Peace Prize in 8 categories and, discover oil in the Negev desert. and he would say, well, we were on the verge of doing that in my government.
My administration. Yeah.
But he may be right. Nevertheless, and it will be, there will be changes as it goes to the floor. Now, the question will be more. Oh, by the way, I kind of liked Prime Minister Bennett's snarky response. He said, "We've done in 36 hours what you did not do in 36 months. We passed a budget." Technically, he is correct.
Yep.
So,
That's a pretty good quip. And I was really interested to see that just it's very it's sweeping reforms that they are proposing in this budget. If it does come to pass, I mean, it would really reshape a lot of things in Israeli society, from not only like helping the poor, helping the Ethiopian Jewish community, helping the elderly, but there's a lot of things, like you were talking earlier about the marriage situation, that the religious have had a hold on. And they also have a big hold on food there in, and the kosher laws and all that. And they've got some kind of reform in there for that. And this
right now you cannot you have two choices. If you have a restaurant in Israel, you can either just say, hey, we're not kosher, we've got shrimp, we've got ham, we've got whatever. But if you want to have a kosher restaurant, you have to get a certificate of kashrut from the rabbinic authorities. And it's a bit of a racket.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, I know Messianic Jews where they, despite doing everything right, they would not give them a certificate.
Wow.
Finally, it went to the Supreme Court, and they were forced to give them a certificate of kashrut. So they're thinking of taking that out of the hands of the Orthodox, so it wouldn't be a racket.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as marriage. And I heard the other day that even one of their chief rabbis is saying, yeah, you know what, maybe it's better, we're really not part of the society of Israel anyways, so let them do what they want to do, we'll do what we want to do. A good portion of ultra-Orthodox Judaism does not even believe in the state of Israel. They think it was a mistake that brought about by secular socialists coming out of Eastern Europe. They actually sided with the Arabs in 1948 against the state of Israel because they thought only the Messiah can bring forth a state. So, there would be some really significant changes in this new budget. And one of the interesting things is that we thought, as this government came together, that, all of these guys, there was just a real kumbaya moment between Bennett and Lapid and the different leaders of all the parties, and that they would just kind of everybody would compromise. Well, and the reason they would compromise is because they knew that if they didn't, it just takes one vote to topple the whole government. 61 out of 60 seats. They lose one, or 61 out of 120. Mm-hmm. You lose one, you lose the majority. And it turns out it's just the opposite, that many of these leaders of the parties have said, well, wait a minute. This is such a razor-thin majority. I'm going to play hardball because they know that if they don't give in to me, the government is going to collapse. Mm-hmm. Now, at the end of the day, most of these guys, they don't want the government collapse, and they're just, it's bravado, and at the someone's going to blink. But here we are. We're at the beginning of August. It's about 2 months now, and against all odds, against the prognosticators, we still have a government in Israel.
Amazing. Well, and they have now till November 4th to make the budget official. So we'll be keeping track of that and updating the listeners, I'm sure, as to the ins and outs of all the political ways there in Israel.
Very good.
Well, thank you for that update on all those issues. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed our weekly podcast, please be sure to send it to a friend or two and give us a review wherever you're listening. That helps folks find this podcast. And be sure to follow the Israel Insider on Facebook and sign up for our daily email, where you can get the inside scoop on happenings in the Holy Land. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.